All right, so in this episode, we're going to be working on the recommendation engine behind Scotchbot. So the goals that we want to do is actually twofold. We want to be able to say, list some qualities about a scotch that you're looking for, and then also potentially map it to a price. So those are the two things we're going to try to hit. We can possibly add more later, but I think that's going to be enough work for just one quick episode. So to dive in, we want to be able to say phrases like, hey Scotchbot, can you recommend me something sweet? Or sweet and very smoky. All right, so we want to be able to say things like that, or maybe has words of ash or other Scotch descriptors in there. And then also I want to be able to include qualifiers, but cheap, and or like, but I'm poor. Kind of fun things like that, and then also doing the other spectrum for doing rich. So how are we going to approach this? So what we'll need to do is, if we want to do the flavor analysis over here, since we already broke out our flavor grouping over here, we actually have these really nice words in here that we can already check. And so what I might do is actually go through and bolster these a little bit. I know I'm getting a little bit off what the database suggested, but we might add a few more words. And so what I want to do is be able to take, basically I want to try to identify what kind of group you are trying to get at. And so what we can do is, given a phrase, like what we're talking about, you can pass it through this function and it will return you back a score for each of the groups. And then you take the group, or the groups with the highest score, and then you use that as one of your search parameters. So that's what we're going to try to tackle. The next thing is, this is actually pretty simple, is we're just going to look for some certain keywords, and then we're going to toggle whether you want a certain price range as Scotch or not. But the core of this hinges on that we have the ability to search the DB. And so that's what we're going to code up first, is the ability to search with, we're going to limit it to just these two factors right now, but I'm hoping that we could expand this out in future revisions. Okay, so let's dive into the Scotch API. So we're going to add in a new way to look at this API through searching. Okay, and to be able to keep this API super expandable, you're actually just going to pass in your parameters up here. And this is going to be an object. And so our parameters so far that we're going to support is, let's call them, well, actually, let's just use the properties that we have here. So we're going to look up your groups. And then also we're going to look up the cost. So those are going to be the two parameters that we're going to support initially out of the gate. And so what we kind of want to do here is we want to, let's just focus on the groups first. And so we want to search through and return each of the scotches that have the groups that you pass. So we're gonna say that each of the search parameters either is a string or an array, or let's just focus on just having an array so we can be consistent. And so we'll have those match in that way. Okay, so we actually can probably wrap this all up into a nice filter. All right, so we're gonna grab our scotches and we're gonna iterate over our scotches, right? Or scotches real quick. Okay, so in this filter we need to check against our params, and so we are going to do an if params with our groups. Okay, we're gonna say that the start result is going to be false, and then at the end of this we are wanting it to be true. Okay, so if we have the variable params like this, one idea we might want to do is loop over the params and check each of them. Because if the group matches but the price doesn't match, then we want it to fail. So one way we could actually do this is, how do I want to do this? I hate doing this live coding sometimes because this is actually a very simple problem. It's like, hey, how do you take these things and just kind of like and them together and it's fine. But trying to enunciate and walk it through verbally adds a whole other layer to making this a little bit more difficult. Okay, so let's just focus on solving the groups and then we can rearrange the code as we go. Okay, so for our groups, so our Scotch will have its own groups. And this is actually going to be a string of potentially, or group, sorry. This can be something like ABC and things like that. So we want to see that basically sum of any of our params groups matches with, so any of these, we're going to pass in the group here. And we're just making sure that this essentially has an index. And an index of group is not equal to -1. Okay, so this means that if we pass in, let's say, a params.groups of A, then what this will do is it'll loop over this, it'll pass and to here, and then it'll say Scotch.group index of A did it basically find it, and up here it's true, so that works out perfect. So if we did, let's say, A or J, do we want to pass in an and or an or for this? So if I pass in A and J, do I want A and J both to match, or either? I think it's an and right now that I actually want. So we move that to an every, pretty simple. Okay, so now A and J both have to be within the Scotch group. So that would actually fail. Okay, let's go with that for now. No, I like the sum. I like the sum. I'm just imagining if you put a lot of words, like if you're like, I want it to be sweet and smoky and pungent and all these other, and I have sherry, it's gonna possibly match with a bunch of groups. And then I'd rather overmatch with a bunch of Scotch suggestions rather than undermatch and say, oh, just nothing matches that. You should know your flavors better. I don't think that's a good experience. So we're going to do some matching. So if any of these match up, then we know that the result is true. I think the signature on the sum command, is returns a Boolean. Yeah, okay, cool. All right. Okay, so perfect. All right, let's actually just give this a spin right out of the gate. Okay, we'll not have to rebuild the whole thing. Scotch dev. I always forget what dev Scotch. Wow, I'm so bad at this. Okay. So we're gonna look up the Scotch API. We're gonna do a search, and we're gonna look up groups of everyone that is A. And this will give me back results. This is gonna be big. Let's just make sure this works. Boom, okay, perfect. So this is everything with A. We're already seeing some bugs. We're seeing that this guy passed in here, and that should definitely not have happened. So we're going to figure out why our logic is failing by looking at our tempdb and diving a bit deeper into this. You know what, I'm just gonna try to remove word wrap off this. That's why I always expand it out. Okay. Right, so we need to move this over to our tempdb. And 1 second here, perfect, okay. So let's run the Scotchbot again. Okay, so I think it just matched on everybody for some reason. These are all A, B's, and C's, so we're gonna modify one of these to just be a BC. And run this again. Okay, so it's still matching on you. Okay, so why though? Okay, we're looking through. So I'm just going to do some console logging to see exactly if what I wrote makes sense to me. Okay, so yeah, I was looking at age time, group index of group. Okay, and then we're just gonna grab this guy then and see why we match like that. Okay, oh my gosh. This is why. Boom. Okay, now that was removed. Perfect. And if we go back to our OpenDB, it's going to give us back much smaller grouping. And by eyeballing this right now, this is looking pretty good. So if we go back to our Scotchbot and we put in MB, it's going to give us hopefully pretty much the same number. Okay. Cool. I'm trying to think if I should use the single cluster in this regard for actually grabbing out the information. I would have to expand out the API a little bit, but that should not be that much of an difficulty. Yeah, I'm just going to move this to supergroup. I know all my spacing's wrong now, but that should work out. And we're going to call this group. Okay, supergroup, group, perfect. And now we're actually matching on the group. The group should be single, and since we're passing in singles, everything should work. So we actually don't have to do this index of anymore. We can just do a straight comparison. Cool. And now we're actually isolating out a fair bit more. And so we're doing A's and B's, and now we're actually seeing our A's and B's being brought in. And if we grab out this B again, then these should all be A's. Ah, beautiful. Okay, so that's working there. I don't think that messes up too much anything else. Yeah, I like the idea of just focusing down. I think that will pan out a little bit better in the future too. Okay. Cool, so now we can search on our groups. And so now with the cost idea, we want to be able to give it in a range of costs to check by. And so an example of that would be, okay, so we have groups here. Since we're pluralizing it, we'll also do it here. And we'll use the same syntax that they were using. So in this example, there's Scotch API. Where do I have the matching? I think it's in the formatter. There we go. So we have these $signs all the way up to 5+. Okay, so we can do like $1 and $2 signs. Cool. So we want to make sure that also, so the insides are ORed, but everything else is AND. Okay. Okay, I think I actually just figured out how to do this here. So what I want to do is for each of these checks, if it ends up being not true, then what I wanted to do is actually just return false immediately. So we're going to check the group actually right here. Yeah, I think that's why I actually put this true down here initially, because if it gets to the bottom, we want it to return true. But we're going to say if this doesn't work out, then we want it to return false. So now this has to work, and then it will return true down here. Boom. And yeah, everything still functions properly. So now we're going to do this is our group check. We're going to work on our cost check. Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to just dive into the code and like actually play around with it to make sure it works. So it's kind of the same code again. I might do this has matching group. I don't like having long booleans and ifs like this. It's actually sometimes really hard to parse. So I like casting these booleans to something that has a bit more readability to it. So you can do something like this. So now, when you see this, beforehand we had to like look at this and kind of figure out what was happening in order to re-understand the logic again, but now we have this nice little like almost a comment that says, oh, does it have a matching group? And so now this reads, if it doesn't have a matching group, return false. So this reads really nice. We can actually drop this comment now because of our variable naming being so explicit, which is pretty great. And we're gonna do the same thing over here. So we're just gonna copy it. Has matching group, has matching cost. Cool. And so we take our costs. So we look through each of them and we see that if the cost is equal to our cost in here, then we wanna return true as well, or return false if it doesn't have a matching cost. Okay, and I think if I don't pass any costs in, this should work out. I think I messed some things up. So let's go back here and just remove this. We should get back our A's. No, definitely messed some things up. Okay, so if it doesn't have a matching group, I think I do want to wrap these in just a giant if statement. Okay. Okay, and the reason I'm doing this is just if you don't pass it, I just don't want any of that logic to run to interfere with anything. Yeah, that's what was causing it. So this was still running and it still was executing. Okay, so that should work. And if we turn this back on, so we're seeing we have some expensive scotches in here, and now there's nothing. Is there really no cheap scotches that are A's? That seems unlikely. Okay. I'm not seeing any. What? Okay, alright. Let's just add in. Go. Okay. There just wasn't any cheap scotches that are in Group A. That's kind of fascinating. Alright. So now we have our search algorithm that takes A's and we get back this variant of costs. And so we can still, we can do something like this with J's. And we can get back some cheaper scotches with J's, which is pretty nice. Boop. Cool. Ardbeg 10-year. Awesome. Wow. Compass Bach Peat Monster. That sounds fantastic. Cool. Okay, so now we've written this little tiny search API that we're getting back our data. Great, I'm actually gonna wrap it up there. And in the next episode, we're going to actually write the parser to extract out these keywords and kind of set up these search terms and then respond back with some recommendations.